Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Mighty Blazes Celebrity Conversations. I'm Jenna Paone, and I am so thrilled today to have the fabulous Jacqueline Mitchard with me and Heather Young. And we're here today to talk about Heather's new release, The Distant Dead. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to give you all a brief introduction about these fabulous authors, and then I'm going to turn the conversation over to them. So first up, we have our interviewer, our celebrity interviewer today, Jacqueline Mitchard, joining us from Cape Cod. We really appreciate it. Hilarious and smart, Jacqueline Mitchard burst onto the literary scene with her very first novel, The Deep End of the Ocean, which I hope you have all read. Oh, and Heather's holding it up. It is spectacular, and I feel like it's something that everyone should read. It was the inaugural selection of the Oprah Winfrey Book Club, which is like the most amazing achievement. Like, you were the first one, right?
That was right, but no one knew that it was a thing.
Yeah, I bet
it's a thing.
Hey, but like, I feel like your book was good enough that Oprah was like, I need to have a book club, and that is the coolest thing ever. And if that isn't honor enough, it was also made into a major feature film. She is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 12 novels for adults and the author of 7 novels for young adults. Her work has won the Bram Stoker and Shirley Jackson Awards, as well as the UK's Walkabout Prize, and was shortlisted for the Orange Broadband Prize for Fiction. The paperback of one of her other bestsellers, Two If by Sea, is recently out. Critics have called this novel exciting, otherworldly, and nearly impossible to put down. She's working on her next 2 novels, actually, we talked about. One is called My Only, which is going to be out next Mother's Day from Mira HarperCollins. And a year from next spring, we have A City in the Woods. Is that right?
Right.
Jocelyn? Awesome.
Right.
So look for those. And also, as if she hasn't done enough, she is the professor of creative writing at Vermont College of Fine Arts and a contributing editor for More magazine. She is also a mom of many children, has a big, beautiful family. And I literally, if she can do this, I am like, I have no excuse to never say I don't have time for anything ever again. You are a superwoman. You are just so impressive. And thank you so much for
You wouldn't say so if you were here right now.
I doubt that. And up next, we have the star of the hour, Heather Young. We're so excited to be here to celebrate your fantastic book. Heather is the author of 2 novels. Her debut, The Lost Girls, won the Strand Award for Best First Novel and was nominated for an Edgar Award. A former antitrust and intellectual property litigator, she traded the legal world for the literary one and earned her MFA from the Bennington Writing Seminars in 2011. Oh, look at the Vermont.
I know, we're neighbors.
Both of you. She lives in Mill Valley, California, where she writes, bikes, hikes, and reads books by other people that she wishes she'd written, all of which are in her library, which that is her real library behind you guys. That is not a backdrop, and it is clearly the most crave-worthy library that needs to be featured in a magazine. I am so jealous. I am moving in with you, Heather. And her new novel, which we're here to celebrate today, The Distant Dead, was named one of the best books of summer by People Magazine, Parade, and Crime Reads, just a few minor publications. And here are some of the rave reviews. The Distant Dead is at heart about the timeliness of human curiosity, the eternal possibility of forgiveness, and the everyday miracle of survival. Electrifying, ambitious, and crushingly beautiful. That's from Kirkus Reviews. There's also this one from Booklist, which says, the second stunning piece of redemptive fiction from Heather Young puts a young boy at the center of a murder mystery and surrounds him with adults struggling with stinging regrets, karmic debts, and unresolved guilt over the loved ones they have lost. Finely woven into the narrative is a profound consideration of the transience of life. An ideal recommendation for fans of Kate Atkinson and Jodi Picoult. And there are about 6 more of these on this page. I would read them all, but I am going to let you 2 talk, because really that's what people care about. I think if you're not convinced to pick up Heather's book from those 2 amazing reviews, you just should. All right, ladies, I'm going to let you take it over. Jacqueline, feel free to hold Heather's feet to the fire and get some questions going.
Okay. Heather, if you weren't in California, as far from me as you could possibly be. I don't know whether I would hug you or give you a slap because I'm so jealous of you. You're such a beautiful writer. And I am the kind of girl who, while loving my friends' achievements, also has to go in the corner and say to myself, be nice, because I have actually read both your books. I didn't realize when I first set out to do this that I had read both your books and loved both of them and admired both of them, because you are able to do that thing that that we all want to achieve, but is so difficult to achieve, which is to write a book that sentence by sentence is just lovely and admirable, but also tells a cracking good story that that is an even more of the reigning queen in the narrative. So what do you got to say for yourself there?
Well, coming from you, I'm kind of all squishy inside right now. So thank you very much. As I said, I have this book. I had to, if by sea somewhere in here, I think I loaned it out and never got it back. You're on my list of the literary writers that I emulate and adore. So,
what a lovely thing to say. And well, in this case, I know that I could have just said, "Isn't it fun to talk?" But absolutely, these books are just impactful and beautifully written, and also moving without being phony. And that's so difficult, isn't it? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the difference between sentiment and sentimentality, if you will, yes. Because you're walking on the ledge, and at any moment you could fall over and drown in the syrup and die, and readers would lose all respect for you. But you are able to evoke in the reader genuine emotion, genuine grief, and lace that almost with a wry sort of observational humor, almost that even in the grimmest situations, just by looking at human beings and the way that we prosecute life. Are you aware of that, of the pitfalls there? Of course
I am very aware. And I think my maybe this is true of most of us, but my native tendency is to be very sentimental in my writing. So I'm constantly on guard against that. And I think the difference between sentimentality and really sentiment is whether or not it feels earned, and whether, if you don't take the easy narrative path is going to lead you right to that gooey, cloying sentimentality. Mm-hmm. If you take the harder way around, it gets you to a more honest, emotional place, I think. So, but it's not easy for me to do that. I have to constantly put up the guardrails for myself and make sure that I don't kind of go wallowing off in this swamp of sentimentality.
I have the same issue because I am such a cheap date when it comes to something that is moving. I mean, give me National Velvet, and I'm crying, which is actually a beautifully written and not sentimental at all book, but I'm crying buckets. Give me A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, I'm crying buckets. And so it is my natural tendency also. When you say taking the harder narrative path, I don't want you to give me an example from your book necessarily, but give me an example of what that looks like in fiction in terms of making a choice that sort of exalts the emotion rather than cheapens it.
Right.
I think any emotion.
Right. I think the key to that lies in character, in your characters. And I think when you have a character and you think to yourself, okay, this character would do this thing, often that is the easiest choice to make. Uh-huh. And I think sometimes if you say, yeah, the cardboard cutout character I've created would do this thing, But what if the character did something slightly different, just a little bit angled off to the left or the right? And then that's a choice that deepens and broadens the character, so that by the time the character is dealing with all the tragedy and difficulties that we throw at them in our work, they feel more well-rounded and like characters whose response, again, feels earned and true, and not just a natural thing that a person with a temper would do, or the natural thing that a lonely boy would do. You make a slightly different choice to expand the character. And I think that's where that is the key to it, I think.
Speaking of lonely boys, and we both have some experience with that in writing stories about lost boys, not the vampire kind, and not the kind in Peter Pan, but the boy at the heart of The Distance Dead, if you will, is a character like that, a character that is complex and also has a difficult narrative course to follow. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think
why would you do such a thing?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things I loved about this book too, is that I like to write about children that age, that sort of at that crucible that's right between, at the outer edges of childhood, when you're stumbling into something that's not quite adulthood but is heading there. That's already a really fraught time for the ordinary person, and then you take these children and you throw these incredible emotional crises at them. I kind of like to do that. Maybe I'm just a child abuser, but the way I can do it is to try to think of a child as just a well-rounded person, just like an adult. You know, they're emotionally immature, and even their thought processes are not mature, but they are a fully realized person, and you kind of honor their personhood by putting them in situations that you would put an adult character in, and that, I think, ends up, you know, making the child character not sentimental and more relatable to adult readers. And that's what, you know, you did that with I'm not going to name any names in your book. I don't want to spoil it.
I tried to do that. I wanted someone who, you know, that people would not necessarily like, but would love.
Yes.
The person who was, there's always, what did Kurt Vonnegut call them? The symptom bearer in a book.
Yes. I love that phrase.
The person where who is like the sin eater for the rest of the cast. Yeah. And you've created a powerful character, and children, young men and women, particularly in adult books where they are not always cast as the main character, can be given short shrift. They can be placeholders, or they can be characters on which we adult readers visit our own emotional needs. Yes. But you avoided all those pitfalls.
Well, I think you have to take those child characters and I mean, I think the tendency is to make the child character a pure innocent, someone who's natively good. And I think if you honor their personhood, then you make them make mistakes, you make them behave selfishly, you make them hurt other people intentionally or unintentionally, just like an adult would. And I think if you do that, then you're going to end up with a child character that's very much more complex.
Okay, new question. What about awful things happening in stories is attractive to you? You have a peach sweater on. You don't look like a murderous person. And you're in a perfectly nice house. What about, why do the God forbids attract you?
Well, I am in fact the person who, so when my daughter, I'm picking her up at the airport and her plane is late, I'm convinced it has crashed. I mean, I go immediately to the dark
place. Why would anyone think anything else?
Exactly. Like, you know, my son misses curfew. It's not because he's hanging out with his friends,
but
he's in this massive car accident and they just haven't called me yet. So I think my mind
is trying to think of how to tell you.
Yes, they just, right. They're on their way to tell me right now, and I should probably get dressed so I, look at least presentable.
Put a bra on, because you never know when you're going to go to the hospital.
Yes. So that's kind of, I mean, I think I leap straight to the dark place faster than most people. And I think that maybe that's something writers have in common, because if you can imagine the dark place so easily in your ordinary life, that's fine, then you can imagine it for your characters in a book.
Jodi Picoult told me once, I write about these things so that they don't happen.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's prophylactic in her life, because she wants to write about all those things so as not to have to endure them. In the novel I'm writing now, just to show you what a lighthearted approach I have to fiction. The first line is, I was picking my son up at the prison gates when I caught sight of the mother of the girl he had murdered.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay, now I want to read the rest of it immediately.
Well, see, here we are, sisters who never met. Most people would say, I want to put that book under the porch and see, what kind of bugs it attracts. But that's not true. We all are drawn to the dark in human experience as readers. And I've never been able to figure out exactly what it is that takes us there. I think because we're fascinated by the worst possible acts that people can commit. And I mean, so was Arthur Conan Doyle. I mean, so was Mary Shelley. Yeah. People have been fascinated by those things since forever.
Well, I think Jodi Picoult was onto something when she said that. Of course, that Jodi Picoult would always be onto something. But I do think our fascination with, it's why we slow down when we pass a car wreck. It didn't happen to us. It happened to someone else today. And it feels like there was a bullet aimed somewhere in our vicinity from karma, and it missed us and it hit them. And we have to just stop and look. And there's a feeling of like, thank God it wasn't me. Thank God it wasn't me. That I think it's why we're drawn to horrifying movies and books as well, because to watch the horror happen to someone else is almost a way of saying, okay, they ate the horror for the day. I'm not going to get any.
Yes. Well, you're absolutely right. Now, do people say to you, and I'm going to bet that they do, because I'm looking at some of your furnishings back there, and you seem to be a person who is cheerful and bright in some part of your life. Do they ever say to you, hey, why don't you write funny things? You're such a charmer. You are able to find lots of times that nugget of brightness and you entertain people. Why don't you?
So I do get that a lot, and I bet you do too. Because, because when I'm writing an email or something, I'm apparently very witty with my emailage, and people will always say, why I picked up your book and I expected it to be like a comedy. I expected to laugh. And I didn't laugh once, not even one time. In fact, I cried. Where does this darker voice come from? I don't know. I think the humorous, superficial me is not really the real me. I think obviously the real me is much more kind of thoughtful and dark. And when you sit down to write, you access the real you.
That's true. We are stripping away that's why they call it the subconscious. It's like the sub basement. Right. It's underneath what we walk around on all day and think of as our ordinary territory.
Right. And I think
what's the book? And if you can't answer this one right now, I can tell you what my book is. Mm-hmm. What's the book you would have written if you could have written it?
Gilead.
Now you are a classed up one.
And I will never write like that. But also The Remains of the Day is another one. I love stories that mine like deep human drama out of the most ordinary of lives. I mean, nothing really happens in The Remains of the Day. But
absolutely not. But my book that I would have written is Never Let Me Go. by the same author.
Yes, yes,
How
yeah.
crazy is that?
How crazy is that? I love that one too. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when I look at that book and I think that is in some ways, and you don't think of it this way, it's a science fiction novel in some crazy way because of the mind communication thing and the
harvesting of
all that stuff.
Yeah.
But what I think of it as is just the most poignant of stories about friendship and so is Remains of the Day.
Yes.
About our relatedness as human beings.
Yeah.
How does he do that? Well, that's why he has a Nobel Prize. And we don't.
And we don't. Yeah.
I know of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yet. I feel like it's possible.
Yet. Oh, right. Yeah.
on that note, I have a question for both of you because you said something really interesting. This whole conversation is amazing. I feel like I'm in like a writer's workshop right now, and I'm learning so much. I'm like, I want to take notes, but like I don't want to be looking down every 5 seconds because it'll show up on the video. But the one thing that struck me that you just said, Jacqueline, is the mining of ordinary lives and relationships.
Actually, that was she who said.
Oh, sorry. Then Heather for deep drama. And I can't help but think, Heather, I know your book takes place in a small town. I know the characters in it and the characters in your book, Jacqueline, your books, they're always very real to life, or mostly very like it's real people, real problems, real, like it's things you actually can imagine on like your worst nightmare. And I'm wondering if you can both talk a little bit more about why for you it's grounding it in reality. Why not science fiction? Why ground it in real life, in real characters, in these, as you said, Heather, we were chatting before, but like the small town, the mystery of the small town, and what could happen in this sort of fascination of like this perfect seeming life and then ripping it wide open. I'm wondering if you two can kind of chat a little bit about that.
Heather first.
Well, I wouldn't rule out writing something science fiction-y. I mean, I feel like it's just a failure of imagination on my part that I haven't written one yet, because there's so much you have to create, and like an entire world you have to, evolve. And I haven't quite managed to think of something like that. But I love reading books with a science fiction edge. I don't know if you've ever read Erica Swyler.
I have not.
So she wrote the Book of Speculation, and then her latest is Light from Other Stars.
Oh,
and Light from Other Stars, they're both kind of have little science fiction-y elements, but Light from Other Stars just goes there with like a time travel machine. It has a time travel machine in it, but it's really about a father and a daughter, and the father is building the time machine because he doesn't want his daughter to grow up. That's really what's happening.
My God, they still my heart.
I know. He wants to slow down time so his daughter will be a child longer. And so it's about love, and it's about loss, and it's about growing up and letting go. And it's all hinged on this framework of this crazy science fiction time machine. And half of it takes place in outer space. And it is so great because it is all about humanity. And
have you read Karen Thompson Walker's books, The Dreamer and the Age of Wonder?
Oh, Age of Wonder.
Yeah, about it. It's about time slowing down. It's about the earth slowing down just a little. And her saying, I remember the last time anyone had a banana.
Yep.
And the blackbirds fall to the ground, and you still grow up and you still live, but the earth is profoundly changed just in the life of one young woman.
Right. And it's just about like the Age of Wonder, you find out in the book, is not about what's happening to the earth. It's about adolescence.
Exactly.
Is adolescence. And it's a middle grade book, but it's of course a book for everybody. I loved it. It's one of my very favorites.
Mine too.
Again, it hangs this really emotionally resonant personal story on a crazy science fiction scaffold. So I'll read any book that.
And let me say this, my mentor was a science fiction writer. He was a pure science fiction writer. He wrote, he wrote more books than Joyce Carol Oates. He was crazily prolific.
What was his name?
Ray Bradbury.
Oh, Yeah.
And he was
no big deal.
Some of the stuff that he wrote was not so good, and some of the stuff he wrote obviously was brilliant. And he told me one time that the most terrifying things happen in bright sunlight.
Yeah.
And that, you know, if you read some of his stories, when he talks about life on other planets, when he talks about the Martian Chronicles, or the extraordinary part of it is not that it's taking place on another planet, but that the old concerns about learning and lasting and love and the possibility of gallantry and loss, those are all what pertain. And the rest of it is just sort of the dressing that goes around that.
Yeah.
story.
And I think if you care about that, then you will be very widely read, because a lot of mysteries do that too. Like there's a murder and there's a detective who's trying to figure out what's going on, but really like Tana French, it's really about the characters and their relationships, and the murder is just the bones of the book. And those bones can change, but if that is at the heart of it, then I'll read it and love it.
Me too. And that is all. I think that is the search for love, the search for significance as a human being is in some sense what every story is about.
Yes, all the good ones anyway. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's about people not necessarily finding it. It's about sometimes they try and they fail. And that's real too. And yeah.
So since that library really just is a facade, and you're going to step outside and we're going to go to lunch, you and I, and we're going to, and Jenna will meet us out there too. I don't know when we're supposed to end this conversation, but I think that we have gotten to the point where we're on our last wraps. I could talk all day I could ask questions all day to these like-minded people. I'm going to ask you what you're working on now, but I'm going to ask it in a different way.
Okay.
Why are you writing the novel that you're writing now? You know, you're starting to, you're dating someone new now. Your old husband is out there trying to earn a living, you know, but now you're dating someone new and you just can't understand why you loved the other person before. What is the precipitating question?
Right. Of the next book. Well, I have not started it yet, but it's in my head. And I've been spending these kind of stressful past few weeks doing research, because that seems to be all my brain can handle right now. But the next story is, it's set in the 1940s in a small town in Iowa. And it's going to be kind of about the immigrant experience, if that makes sense, on a very, again, intimate scale. It's about some workers who come to the town to take over the jobs at the chicken plant while the soldiers are away fighting, and the workers have come from Mexico. And the family at the heart of it that lives in the town, they have come from Canada, and they haven't really meshed well with the town either. So I'm just toying with this idea of outsiders and otherness and how people integrate into a new society. It's also, I think, the heart of the story is going to be about the relationship between a mother and a daughter. And I think
something awful happen.
What?
Did something awful happen?
Oh yeah, it's a murder mystery. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just. This sounds all very good, but there's some dead people involved, and
sure. But it's really about, like, I tend to get in really deep with parent-child relationships. Something about that really pulls me in. So,
well, and again, it's such a primary. Sometimes I think when I was widowed when I was young, and I've been happily married after that for a long time. But sometimes when I see movies touted or books that say that really explores a marriage, you know, between two people who don't have children. I think, you know,
right.
Who cares?
Right. Yes, there are plenty of writers writing right now who time and time again dig into like Alistair Burke, who like dig into marital relationships.
Right.
I have no interest in writing about marital relationships.
Neither do I, except where they lead to chicken murder.
Yes.
The primary, to me, what I want to scratch away at are the most primary of emotions.
Me too. And they come from the primary family of origin.
Yes.
Those things that are down in the swampy part of your subconscious that are, you know, come from the first 3 or 4 years of life and the relationships you have with your first family. Yes. That's really delicious, mucky stuff to write about.
You bet it is. Jenna, do you have any last things that you'd like to?
Gosh, this is just such an interesting conversation. I'd actually like to know, and I think I already know the answer based on this conversation that we've just had. I'd love to hear from both of you just what is the first thing that you start with when you start with an idea? Is it always the same? Is it character? Is it the concept of I want to write about this particular type of thing? Is it I've got a plot, I've got a story, I've got another grisly murder that I thought up of, and Heather, and like another terrible way to die that I'd like to speak about? What is there something that comes first, and is it usually the same thing?
Well, I would like to hear Jacqueline answer that because she's written a lot more books than I have.
For me, there's a grain, and you know, no one has ever mentioned this image before, so I'll be the first. It's like the pearl in the oyster.
Yeah.
No, I mean the irritant that creates the pearl always comes from real life. Mm-hmm. It always comes from for example, in the book that I'm writing now, well, that I'm finishing now, revising now, I was at a writer's conference and I was getting coffee in the lobby, and the woman in front of me dropped her book on the ground. I picked it up for her and we started to talk. We were sort of an age. And I said to her, "Oh, are you here for the writer's conference?" In a coffee line, though I'm a shy person, in a coffee line, I have the personality of a golden retriever, you know, so I'm, you know, so, and she said, "No, I come every weekend to see my son at the prison. He's doing a life sentence.
Wow.
He killed the only girl he ever loved in a drug-induced psychosis."
Wow.
Oh my God.
And I felt exactly as you do. I mean, it was breathtaking.
Yeah.
I carried that around with me, accreting layers of pearlness, whatever you call that stuff, for years. Mm-hmm. And then I finally figured out a way that I could write about that in some way that would not correct history, but redeem history, that it would redeem real life. And in every case that I can think of, every book that I've ever written, including The Deep End of the Ocean, including the first book that I ever wrote, which was based on a story that happened when I was in high school, that happened to a little kid named Stephen Stainer, who was kidnapped. You know that story. Yeah. He was kidnapped and kept by a pedophile for like 11 years until the guy took another little boy, and then he took the other little boy and walked out. And the real story is ever so much more horrifying than anything I could have made up, because his older brother, Cary Stainer, became a serial killer, killed 2 women in Yosemite.
Yeah.
And that was the germ of the story. And people think that my books are tough to read. You know, it's the real stories that just they leave you with your tongue on the ground.
Right. Well, I would say for the Distant Dead and the book I'm about to start, it is similar. There was something I read about in real life that sparked this. And in the case of the upcoming book, there was a New York Times article a few years ago about these men, these developmentally disabled men who had been working at this chicken processing plant outside a little town in Iowa for like 40 to 50 years. They had been brought there when they were young. They had been housed at a facility because they were deemed not capable of functioning in the real world, but they had essentially been turned into slave labor for this chicken processing plant. And the town nearby never really paid attention to them. Nobody really asked the right questions. So here were these men who are now in their 60s who've been paid nothing for 40 years of work. And some expose from the Des Moines Register brings this all to light. And I thought, wow, that is really horrible. And I've changed it for the story. The people who are brought in to work at the chicken plant are young Mexican teens who have committed some kind of crime and were put into sort of like, juvenile delinquency. And this is their work training so that they can, when they get out, they'll be functional, but essentially they're being used for free, hardcore labor. And that was, so the impetus for that story, which I changed a little bit, was from that article. It was horrifying that this little town in Iowa that considers itself to be so mom and pop and apple pie just looked the other way at 40 years of abuse.
And really, that is the only way that you can get at the political. At the political, you can say it all day, but until you see that life that really matters, until you're brought face to face with that life.
Yep.
And you have to conjure with what that really means in human terms, then you're free to go on not doing anything.
Right. And the shame, there was a video made of all the interviews of the people in this small town, the shame in their voices once they realized what they'd ignored and how complicit they had been was, I didn't feel a whole lot of sympathy for them, but it was remarkable how bad they felt once it was shoved in front of them and they couldn't look away anymore.
Which feels like exactly what we're all experiencing right now, right? That is so applicable to what is happening in the world. And, we're all having this, it's like a global reckoning, or at least a very widespread reckoning of our own complicities, our own shortcomings, our own failures, and
very much so.
Trying to redeem the history in real life.
And trying to make up for the complicity that we all were part of for so long. Yeah.
Thank God we have writers like you who can guide us. One of the things about reading is it allows you to learn, right? It allows you to step into someone else's experience and possibly learn from them of how would I react in this situation? How could possibly, what's the worst thing I could do, which is often what the character does. And, and how could I then fix that? Or how could I, write different or act in the future? Ladies, thank you. This is I hate to end this conversation. I would just keep you here for 7 hours, and that seems unfair, but I want to remind everyone to please buy the Distant Dad by Heather Young. Please go and buy all of Jacqueline's books. I know Jacqueline wants to give a shout out to Brewster Books in Brewster, Massachusetts.
Brewster Books, best little bookstore.
I'm also a Cape person, so I'm very partial to the local bookstores. We have so many on the Cape, and thank you for giving them a shout out. And Heather, do you have an independent bookstore that you'd like to give a shout out?
So Book Passage is my little local independent in Cordova, California. I live
when you go there, they give you the stationery.
I know, I still have the stationery.
You don't know what they're talking about, but trust me, when you go there on your book tour, you're going to be thrilling.
They give you stationery with your name on it, and it's gorgeous.
I love that every independent bookstore that gets mentioned on this, somebody's like, yes, they're amazing because. So I just want to remind everybody out there who's watching, please support the authors right now who are publishing during these strange times, who are not on their book doors, who are not able to do things normally. I hope you appreciate the intimate, in some ways, I think this format gives you a more intimate, up close and personal look into authors' heads. But please buy The Distant Dad. Please buy all of Jacqueline Mitchard's books. They're coming out, everyone. Please support them, and please, if possible, do so through an independent bookstore, because we want these places to still be there. We want to be able to walk through the doors and feel welcomed by things like stationery and special experiences. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for
And
having
it was
us.
such a pleasure. And I thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you today, actually, again at 4 p.m. We have Eleanor Lippman and Ellen Hildebrand coming up. We have 2 celebrity conversations in one day today. And I love that we're going from dark murders and, you know,
To
twisting
even darker murders.
so we're balancing it today. We're going to give you some sunshine and beach life a little later. Thank you guys so much once again. Everybody have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.